interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Bam.
So have you all figured out how we traveled through time?
The guards are here for your protection.
We've been trapped like rats in a cage.
Order will be maintained.
Don't you want to know the limits of this thing?
All Things Are Possible is the second episode of the rebooted 4400 series over on the CW, and for the first time in Pondering Pilot's history, I'm talking about more than just the pilot because my review of that first episode spawned such a huge, lively discussion from literally everybody. So I'm really grateful for that, even though a majority of you absolutely hated that episode. I mean, even looking over on IMDb, or the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, this show is getting trashed by what appears to be everybody, primarily fans, though, of the original show, as well as those that in general just cannot stand heavy-handed PC narratives, which granted, that first episode definitely had. Similarly, though, it's hard not to also notice the critic score for 4400 on Rotten Tomatoes is fresh at 78%, which makes a lot more sense to me as a critic because I know from a purely technical vantage point it was not poorly constructed, but 78% is also much lower than the original show, which had a critic score of 95%. So I'm not here to say that this show is going to beat the original, or should be compared that heavily to the original either. Instead, I'm here to see if this show, on its own, is getting any better. I mean, will people stop hating it, or are they right? I mean, is it getting worse? Based purely on that second episode, my guess is that it's getting better. And you should at the very least give the second episode a shot for a couple of reasons that I'm going to try to lay out. So first of all, what happens in episode 2? So there's a couple of storylines in this episode. The main one comes from the character of Isaiah Johnson, who is, in his former life, he was a pastor or a preacher, and he was pressured by, I want to say, his own father to leave the woman that he impregnated to focus all his attention on the church and the Word of God, which is definitely something that he borrows in modern day as sort of a growing leader of the 4400. So I would actually say that his character is the rebooted series version of Jordan Collier. If you didn't see that original show, there was a 4400 movement headed up by this character called Jordan Collier, who was very mysterious. You never really knew his intentions. But he owned this thing called the 4400 Center, which housed the 4400 movement, which was essentially a cult, and he got people to live with him rent-free, and in return, he had a way about speaking that got people to do things for him. And you got a little bit of that in this episode already as well. So in the original show, that was always an aspect that caused concern and division among the 4400. And again, we do see a little bit of that in this episode as well, when he brings the group to the spot that they returned from and had a speech. Some people are really into what he's saying, while others are like, this might be an issue, guys. Another storyline of the episode revolves around powers and the limits of them. So one of the characters has a healing ability, as we saw from the first episode. We get to see more of what that character is able to do with their healing, how much pain they can endure and still heal from. Also, the character of Mildred, who has telekinesis. We get to see her try out her powers a little bit more, and by the end of the episode, we learn that she can levitate a grown man. And we also get to discover a new ability by Theo Germain's character of Noah, who has the power of suggestion through song. And I actually really like his ability because it feels the most original in the series so far. Power of suggestion's one thing, but done only through singing feels very much in line with how the original 4400 show would work, actually. And by the way, Theo Germain is a transgendered actor, and they do not talk about that at all in this episode, which, for a PC social justice warrior show that y'all think it is, you would think that it would be a big plot line. Oh, a transgendered character. It's not, though. No, this entire episode felt much more in line with what you would have liked to see in the first episode. You know, more of the mystery of what happened and why. Now, there still was a PC narrative in this episode as well. It just wasn't as heavy-handed. It felt much more natural. My only problem with this episode actually came down to the flashback stuff. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about it doing the whole Lost thing because this episode was clearly Isaiah-centric, explaining how Isaiah's life went through flashbacks before he was sent to the future and how he's determining what that means for now. In the original show, we wouldn't so much get flashbacks. We would get a glimpse of how these people's lives went before they were sent to the future. And then we would get like this case file thing where it would go, John Smith, taken in 1945, abilities unknown, etc., which allows for more story in modern time. The flashback stuff in this seemed a little bit over the top for me, limiting what we could essentially get through storytelling. It's not the end of the world though, it's easily something that I could get used to. Plus, I think the show might have some problems with production and set design because I had a little bit of an issue believing that his time period, Isaiah's time period, was in the 90s, other than the turtleneck that he wears. Again, stuff that can easily be improved upon over time. In general though, for me, this was easily an improvement in the show, and I'm much more at ease in terms of how loyal it will become as a rebooted series. It'll always be CW though, unless some other station buys it out, so it'll always have those CW-isms. You can't really change that, but I'm looking forward to learning about more and more 4400s now. But how about you guys? Do you think 4400 has improved for the second episode? Why or why not? Let me know in the comment section down below, and as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with the next review. And until then, peace out!
Dave examines movies we just watch for fun. Davey is the expert. He is the number